Welcome, brave adventurers and curious explorers, to our nightly rendezvous with wonder. As the clock ticks softly and the night deepens, we're about to step through a portal into a world of endless possibilities. Let your body sink into the comfort of your bed. Feel the gentle weight of your eyelids and allow your mind to float free like a balloon rising into a starry sky. Our tale for tonight, Goodnight Mountain, is the wind that will carry that balloon to amazing new heights. As the sun began to dip behind the towering peaks, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, young Ethan stood at the base of the great mountain, his blue eyes wide with wonder. The day's warmth was fading, replaced by the cool evening air that carried the crisp scent of pine and snow. Ethan loved the mountains, with their majestic slopes, diverse wildlife, and the constant whisper of wind through the trees. "Aunt Sarah," Ethan said, tugging on his aunt's sleeve, "does the mountain go to sleep like we do?" His Aunt Sarah, an experienced park ranger with a lifetime of love for the wilderness, smiled down at him, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, Ethan, the mountain doesn't sleep exactly like we do, but it does have its own special way of saying goodnight. Would you like to hear about it?" Ethan nodded eagerly, his tousled hair bobbing with excitement. "All right then," Aunt Sarah said, taking his small hand in hers. "Let's watch the mountain say goodnight together." As they began to walk along a gentle trail, the last rays of sunlight filtered through the evergreen trees, creating long shadows across the rocky ground. Aunt Sarah began to speak in a soft, soothing voice. "You see, Ethan, as day turns to night, the mountain begins to whisper its goodnights to all the plants and creatures that call it home. It starts with the smallest beings first." Ethan leaned forward, straining his ears to hear the mountain's whispers. "Down in the soil," Aunt Sarah continued, crouching to point at the ground, "the tiny microorganisms that have been busy all day breaking down fallen leaves and pine needles start to slow their activity. They settle into the dark, cool earth, taking a break from their important work." Ethan imagined the microscopic creatures snuggling into tiny beds made of pebbles, and he giggled at the thought. "Next," Aunt Sarah said as they moved on, "the mountain says goodnight to the insects. The bees, who spent the day pollinating wildflowers, return to their hives high up in hollow trees. They'll huddle together for warmth through the chilly mountain night." As if on cue, a bumblebee buzzed past them, heading towards a cluster of columbines where its nest was hidden. "The butterflies find safe spots to rest, often on the underside of leaves or in crevices of tree bark," she added, gently pointing to a peacefully resting swallowtail butterfly. Its vibrant wings were folded up, the insect almost invisible against the rough bark. As they walked higher up the trail, the shadows grew longer, and the air became filled with new sounds: the chirping of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. "But now," Aunt Sarah continued, her voice low and rhythmic, "as the night grows deeper, the mountain says goodnight to the flowers. Many alpine flowers close their petals, protecting their delicate parts from the cold night air and frost. They stopped by a patch of beautiful mountain bluebells, whose delicate blooms were slowly closing for the night. But not all flowers sleep at night," she explained. "Some, like the evening primrose lower down the mountain, are just waking up. They bloom at night to attract night-flying moths for pollination." Ethan watched in awe as the bluebells gently folded their petals, as if tucking themselves in for the night. As they continued their walk, Ethan noticed how different the mountainside looked and felt as night approached. The vibrant colors of day were fading into softer, muted tones. Shadows played among the rocks and trees, creating mysterious shapes and hiding places. "What about the trees, Aunt Sarah?" Ethan asked, looking up at the towering pines and firs. The trees," Aunt Sarah said with a smile. They have their own special nighttime routine. During the day, they've been busy making food through photosynthesis. At night, they focus on growing instead. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. They grow at night? That's right, she nodded. Trees grow mostly at night, and in the early morning hours. They use the sugar they made during the day to build new cells. So in a way, nighttime for trees is like dinner time for us. Ethan giggled at the thought of trees having dinner while he slept. As they passed by a babbling mountain stream, Aunt Sarah continued. The trees also breathe differently at night. During the day, they take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. But at night, this process reverses. So they're breathing like us at night? Ethan asked. In a way, yes, Aunt Sarah agreed. It's all part of the wonderful cycle of life on the mountain. They paused by a small alpine meadow, its grasses swaying gently in the evening breeze. And let's not forget the grasses and small plants, she said softly. They too prepare for the night, some folding their leaves to conserve moisture in the cool mountain air. Ethan watched as the grasses seemed to bow their heads, as if nodding off to sleep. As the night deepened, Ethan and his aunt found a fallen log to sit on, surrounded by the gentle, nighttime sounds of the mountain. The first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, seeming so much brighter and closer up here on the mountainside. The mountain has its own special nightlife, Aunt Sarah said, her voice blending with the symphony of crickets and rustling leaves. While some plants and creatures rest, others come alive, creating a beautiful balance in this alpine ecosystem. Ethan nodded sleepily, his imagination filled with images of flowers closing their petals like eyelids, trees stretching their branches towards the stars, and nocturnal animals emerging from their daytime hiding places. But what about the rocks, Aunt Sarah? He asked, fighting to keep his eyes open. How does the mountain say goodnight to them? Aunt Sarah smiled, clearly impressed by Ethan's thoughtful question. The rocks. They're like the mountain's bones, Ethan. They don't sleep, but they do change. At night, as the temperature drops, the rocks contract slightly. Then, as the sun warms them during the day, they expand again. This constant changing helps to slowly shape the mountain over many, many years. Ethan closed his eyes, imagining the giant rocks of the mountain sighing as they settled in for the night. In his mind, he could almost hear their whispered stories of ancient times and the changes they'd seen. As the night wore on, Ethan and his aunt sat in comfortable silence, listening to the nocturnal symphony of the mountain. The air was filled with a medley of soft sounds, the gentle rustle of pine needles in the breeze, the quiet trickle of the nearby stream, the occasional call of a night bird. Aunt Sarah, Ethan said after a while, his voice thick with sleepiness. I think I can hear the mountain saying goodnight. His aunt smiled and pulled him close. What does it sound like, sweetheart? Ethan was quiet for a moment, concentrating hard. It sounds like a big, gentle lullaby. Like when Mom sings to me before bed, but deeper and with lots of different voices. It's peaceful and makes all the plants and animals feel safe and loved. Aunt Sarah's eyes glistened with emotion in the starlight. That's beautiful, Ethan. I think you've understood the mountain's goodnight perfectly. As they sat there, embraced by the night and the soothing presence of nature, Aunt Sarah began to hum softly. It was a tune that seemed to blend seamlessly with the sounds around them, creating a perfect mountain lullaby. Ethan's eyelids grew heavier, and he leaned against his aunt, feeling safe and content. As he drifted off to sleep, he imagined all the mountain residents settling down for the night, the flowers closing their petals, the bees snuggling in their hives, the trees growing silently in the dark, and the rocks whispering ancient secrets to each other. In his dreams, Ethan soared over the mountain like an eagle. He helped tuck flower petals closed for the night and sang lullabies to sleepy marmots. He danced with moonbeams on alpine lakes and slid down glaciers on starlight. The mountain cradled him in its rocky embrace, whispering secrets of endurance, majesty, and the timeless rhythms of nature. As the night wore on, a gentle mist began to rise from the valleys, creeping up the mountainside and wrapping around the trees. Dewdrops formed on leaves and grass, each one a tiny mirror reflecting the starry sky above. In a nearby cave, a family of bears shifted in their sleep, dreaming of the berries they'd feast on when spring returned. On the log, Ethan slept peacefully in his aunt's arms, his dreams filled with the wonders of the mountain. Aunt Sarah gazed at the star-filled sky above, marveling at nature's ability to inspire such wonder and imagination in her nephew. As the first light of dawn began to tinge the eastern sky, Ethan stirred in his sleep. Aunt Sarah looked down at him, smiling at the peaceful expression on his face. "Ethan," she whispered gently, "it's time to wake up. The mountain is saying good morning." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and he looked around in momentary confusion before remembering where he was. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and then gasped in delight at the sight before him. The sun was just peeking over a distant peak, its rays catching the mist and turning it into a golden haze. The mountainside, which had been relatively quiet through the night, now seemed to come alive with renewed energy. Birds began their morning chorus, their songs echoing across the slopes. Flowers that had closed for the night were slowly unfurling their petals, reaching for the first light of day. "Look, Aunt Sarah," Ethan exclaimed, pointing at a nearby patch of Indian paintbrush where the vibrant red blooms were opening. "The mountain's waking up," Aunt Sarah nodded, smiling. "That's right, sweetheart. Just like us, the mountain has its own way of greeting the new day." As they watched, the golden light of the rising sun spread across the mountainside, chasing away the last shadows of night. A herd of deer emerged from the forest to graze in a meadow, their ears twitching alertly. A marmot popped out of its burrow, whiskers twitching as it surveyed its domain. "Aunt Sarah," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe, "can we say good morning to the mountain?" His aunt smiled and nodded. "Of course we can. Why don't you go ahead?" Ethan stood up on the log, took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, and called out, "Good morning, mountain. Thank you for letting me see you say goodnight. I hope all the plants and animals had wonderful dreams." As if in response, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, showering them with dewdrops that sparkled in the morning light. Ethan giggled, imagining that the mountain was giving him a refreshing good morning splash. Aunt Sarah stood up and took his hand. "Come on, Ethan. Let's go have some breakfast at our campsite. We can spend the day exploring and see how the mountain changes from morning to afternoon." As they walked along the trail back towards their camp, Ethan took one last look at the awakening mountainside. Every tree, rock, and creature seemed to pulse with life and energy, full of promise for the new day ahead. Ethan smiled, feeling like he now shared a special secret with the mountain. The knowledge of how it said good night and good morning to all its wonderful inhabitants. From that day on, whenever Ethan visited the mountains, whether during sunny summer days or on crisp autumn evenings, he always made sure to wish the mountain and its residents a good night or a good morning. And as he grew older, he never forgot the magic of that night when he learned about the mountain's bedtime routine. It instilled in him a lifelong love and respect for nature and all its wonders, a gift as precious and enduring as the mountain itself. And so, as we end our tale, we too bid good night to the mountain, to its towering peaks and hidden valleys, to its sturdy trees and delicate wildflowers, to all its visible and invisible marvels. May it inspire us in our dreams and greet us with majesty in the morning, forever a source of wonder and strength in our lives. Good night, mountain. Until we meet again.